The KKK's second incarnation was widely accepted in many aspects of American life. They had millions of members, and this included many politicians like the governor of Colorado, Clarence Morley. I mentioned Colorado because that is where this photograph is taken, Klansmen happily posing for a photograph on a Ferris wheel. They would often host annual picnics, and at their height, the KKK also had baseball teams, which had games against all black teams and all Jewish teams. To start off with, I'll talk about their game in Wichita against the Wichita Monrovians in June 1925. This team got their name from the capital of Liberia, which was somewhat fitting for an all-black team. After all, this West African country was set up 100 years beforehand as a home for returning slaves. They were also quite a dominant team. For instance, in 1923, in the Western Cutlet League, they won 52 of their 60 games, and as their own stadium began drawing larger and larger attendances, the team began to help out the local community. For instance, they gave a lot of their money to the Phyllis Wheatley's Children's Home, so they were always quite happy to take on any opposition to raise funds and further these causes. They therefore agreed to take on Wichita Klan No. 6 in 1925, and a lot of the money went to these charities. As for the Klan, not every Klansman was happy that they began to play baseball, especially against all black teams. Dr. Harry Emerson Fosdick, for instance, said, "The millennium will come when the Ku Klux Klan and the Knights of Columbus play a baseball game with a Negro umpire for the benefit of the Jewish employees of Henry Ford at Zion City." So both sides were obviously aware of the problems such a game could bring, and the local paper reported the rules pre-match. Only baseball is on tap at Island Park. Strangleholds, razors, horsewhips, and other violent implements of argument will be barred at the baseball game at Island Park this afternoon, when the baseball club of Wichita Klan No. 6 goes up against Wichita's crack-coloured team. The reporter goes on to say it would be a peculiar attraction due to the wide difference of the two organisations, but also a well-played amateur contest. On the side of the coloured boys is the fact they've had a ball team here for several years. To avoid any bias, the umpires employed were World War I veterans, W. Irish Garrity and Dan Dwyer. These were both white men, but as you can guess from their names, they were Catholics and targets of the Klan as well. The Ku Klux Klan during the first and later incarnations would of course target mainly black people, but during the 1910s and 20s they would seek out whichever group the local white Protestants feared. So this was usually Catholics at that time, but could also be Jews, French Catholics in some areas, Irish Italians, or anything really. This allowed them to spread into areas which had a tiny black population, and the Klan in the 1920s tried to expand their appeal to all sorts of people. For instance, after women were given the right to vote, they created the Women's Klan, and they went one further and created youth movements. Strangely, one crucial thing to their rise was Prohibition. It was apparent that the government could do very little to properly enforce it, so the Klan stepped in and used it as a way to target immigrants, predominantly Catholics, from Italy and Ireland. This in particular proved to be crucial in persuading many women to join. After all, women's groups like the Women's Christian Temperance Movement had pushed for Prohibition, and now the Klan was allegedly defending that. They would also hold annual picnics and the likes to keep up this air of respectability, while immigrant families were persecuted. In Williamson County, Illinois, for instance, they had a number of disturbances like the Heron Massacre, when striking miners clashed with strikebreakers in 1922. Well, after this, a number of Klansmen had been deputized by the sheriff, and they began attacking the homes of immigrants, most of which were Italians, under the guise of stopping bootleggers. While the non-Protestants formed their own clan of sorts, which was known as the Red Knights, or the Knights of the Flaming Circle, and as one newspaper in 1923 wrote, "Flaming Circle admits Catholics, Jews and Negroes, but bars Protestants." They clashed with the KKK in Ohio in August 1923, where some reports put the number of people fighting as high as 3,000. The next year, in fact, martial law had to be declared in Niles, Ohio, after 18 hours of fights between the two groups. So, although there was of course racial tensions between the Catholic community and the black community, the decision to use Catholics as umpires seems to be a fair compromise. With the Catholics as umpires, the two sides met at Island Park, and the Wichita Monrovians won the game 10-8. But you may be asking yourself, why would the Klan even want to take part in this game? Well, in Kansas they had about 60,000 Klansmen in 1923, divided up into about 30 organizations. But they had one very key critic, William Allen White. He was a well-known and respected journalist in Kansas who warned the Klan had introduced into Kansas the curse that comes to civilized people, the curse that rises out of unrestricted passions of men governed by religious intolerance and racial hatred. He also described them as a self-constituted body of moral idiots. Then, in 1924, he ran for governor of the state on a largely anti-Klan platform. As an independent, he didn't stand much chance of winning, but he still did remarkably well, getting 23% of the vote, only 30,000 fewer votes than the Democratic candidate. So, although the Klan had reached its peak in 1925, the tide was turning against them, and it wouldn't be long before things began to fall apart. The game therefore was potentially one of the many stunts to sort of repair their image or make it seem like they weren't a bloody organisation of murderers and thugs. It wasn't just in Kansas that they were facing backlash across the country. Like in Indiana, they hoped to hold a parade and picnic in the predominantly Catholic area of South Bend. Well, the students at the University of Notre Dame pelted their headquarters with potatoes and then chased them out of town. Lou Holtz, a former coach at Notre Dame, has claimed this is where the team gets their name, the Fighting Irish, from. This was particularly crucial because it happened in Indiana. This is where D.C. Stevenson led his own Klan after breaking away from the national KKK and was incredibly powerful. For instance, after alleged Klansman Edward L. Jackson was elected governor, Stevenson declared, "I am the law in Indiana." He also began to see himself as the leader of an invisible empire, while the Klansmen were considered his subjects. So students chasing the Klan out of town marked a turning point, and Stevenson would later be brought down after many controversies. Elsewhere, the Klan played Jewish teams. Like in 1926 in Arlington, Virginia, the Hebrew All-Stars took on the Klan at the local Jewish community center. Once again, I'll reiterate, yes, the Klan were vehemently opposed to Jewish people. In fact, the KKK was largely reborn due to the lynching of a Jewish man named Leo Frank. There was also the film The Birth of the Nation, which portrayed the Klan as heroes, and this had a huge impact on the reformation of the Klan. But so too did the lynching of Frank in Georgia. When a teenage girl was found dead, he was accused of her murder, and mobs demanded his blood, shouting, "Hang the Jew." While Frank was in prison, another inmate named William Green tried to kill him because he wanted to keep the other inmates safe from mob violence. Frank's presence was a disgrace to the prison, and he would be pardoned if he killed Frank. Outside of the prison, men formed the Knights of Mary Fagan, named after the murdered girl, and eventually broke into the prison, got Frank and lynched him. Souvenir postcards of the lynching were sold, as were cuttings of Frank's clothes. One of the murderers, in fact, was a former governor of the state, Joseph Mackay Brown. Half of Georgia's Jews fled the state after this, and so too did the current governor. The Anti-Defamation League was set up as a response to such open and violent anti-Semitism, and of course the Klan re-emerged during this time. Plus, remember, all of this happened just a decade before the KKK faced off against an all-Jewish baseball team. Well, the game in Arlington unfortunately went to the Klan, but one interesting player for the Jewish team was Abe Povich, and he was the uncle of Maury Povich, the TV presenter. This match also came around the same time that there was a movement to get Jewish people into sports all over the world. This movement was called Muscular Judaism. Another interesting story that revolves around Muscular Judaism is the creation of a football team over in Austria named Hakoah Vienna. They had a great deal of success over in Europe and toured the United States a couple times. Unfortunately, however, Austria would be taken over by the Nazis, and the team was promptly dismantled. Back in the USA, Jewish teams played a few games against the Klan. It is said that the Klan lost a previous encounter, and Vinny, the catcher for the Jewish team, retold the story years later, saying they felt that they were in trouble because the Klan had picked up their bats at what they thought was an inappropriate time, and they were coming after them. So not all games ended so peacefully. As for another strange baseball team, you had the House of David community. This was a cult-like community in Michigan which believed that the world was coming to an end, and they were incredibly popular at one point. For instance, they even had a zoo inside their commune. Well, they developed a baseball team which was very talented and toured the country promoting their community. From what I can gather, they were somewhat similar to the Harlem Globetrotters, putting on skillful displays and the likes. Otherwise, the Mormons also fielded teams out of Salt Lake City to garner some support. It was a very strange time for baseball. So my question to you today is, can you find any other stranger sports games that took place throughout history? There are a number of football matches you can have there. For instance, when the Nazis came to play at White Hart Lane in London, and the swastika flew above the stadium. Or there was a match between Red Star Belgrade and Dinamo Zagreb, and it is said that this match started the Yugoslav Wars. But leave your suggestions in the comments below.